All right, so let's talk about Aaron Jones to start off with. There's reports that he had a prolonged period of time when he was out on the sideline getting evaluated. It turns out he had a rib injury, and the reason for his prolonged timeline is that they only have the fluoroscopy or portable x-ray on one side of the stadium, so he had to get carted all the way to the other side. The problem with x-rays though is that they don't tell us the full story about ribs. So although they say that he's good, I would wait until they get the final report from either a CT scan or an MRI where they can visualize this costal cartilage or this rib cartilage, as well as really specifically evaluate the ribs, because even on x-ray it's easy to miss rib fractures. Even with dedicated rib films, you can still miss it, and the only way to definitively rule out a rib fracture is with either a CT scan or an MRI where you're able to visualize the ribs a lot more clearly. So this can be a big pain control issue, so until we get more of a word or more of a practice report, I would still be uncertain about him playing this upcoming week. Dalton Kincaid had a knee injury where he took a direct blow to the flex knee. That puts the PCL structure at risk there. And PCL injuries, as we've seen before, can sideline a player for quite a long period of time. You can technically play through them, but it's really uncommon. Fortunately, they have an upcoming bye week, week 11, so it comes at the perfect time. I would say that he has a strong chance at missing week 12, though. We have to see what the final MRI report says. We've talked before about PCL injuries and how they rarely require surgery, but they do require a good amount of rest rehab because there is a lot of stabilizing that the posterior cruciate ligament is responsible for. So you want to make sure that it is healed significantly so you're not feeling significant pain or instability on a lot of those football specific movements. Sam LaPorta had an AC joint sprain. Dan Campbell said it's not a sprain that's going to keep him out for like 4 weeks. Pretty much tells us that's an AC joint grade 1. That means that ligament right there is just inflamed and not torn. It does require a period of rest. I would say he's got a strong chance at sitting this upcoming week. These are those different types that we talked about before. You can see the grade 1, how the ligament isn't even completely torn. It is significantly painful though. We've talked before about the type of injections you can do there to help control the pain. But in the short-term period of time, even with an injection, it can be hard to play through, especially with positions that take a lot of the in-between tackles hits. Let's run through a bunch of hamstrings. So Nico Collins ended up not playing despite being activated about a day before the game. So it seems like he's symptom-free. I would be super surprised if we don't see him suiting up next week. If he's not playing next week, then there's something else going on that's more significant than the hamstring, and we just haven't been told about it because from all reports, he is symptom-free with the hamstring, and he was activated, and he was practicing without issue, so there's not any reason for him not to play. Nico Collins should play this upcoming week. I don't know why he didn't play last week. He was symptom-free. They activated him off IR. Didn't seem like there was any kind of significant issues. I think they just wanted to avoid any kind of re-aggravation by returning him back too soon. Seems like the Texans could have used him, but it is what it is. I'd be very surprised if we don't see Collins back this upcoming week. Buccaneers are on bye this upcoming week, but after that, I would say that we have about the same chance of Nico Collins playing last week for Mike Evans coming back week 12, but I'll be extremely surprised if we don't see him back week 13. I definitely think he's a player that we should trade for. He has a history of being extremely durable, and even with the increased hamstring risk, I think that he would be a great player to have on your squad going into the playoffs. You want consistent players in the fantasy football playoffs, and there's not many more consistent than Evans. I don't have quite as good of news for the next player, Brian Robinson. It sounds like he practiced Wednesday, Thursday, and then he actually logged a do not practice on Friday. So that's not great. That means that he had a setback with hamstrings. We've talked about how they have extremely long tendons extending into the muscle, creating a large muscle to tendon ratio. That tendon itself is very hard to heal. It's usually this bicep femoris that's on the right over there that gets injured. And I would expect there to be a multi-week absence upcoming for Brian Robinson. So Ceedee Lamb didn't do well with Cooper Rush. It wasn't so much the injury. We talked about it before. He seemed to do well with the injury. He just didn't get targets or receptions. So I'd be concerned about him. I'll try and offload him if possible. Dak's out for the season, so it's not going to be great. Brian Thomas Jr. also didn't do great. He also has a chest injury, which is either bruised ribs or rib cartilage. That probably limited it a little bit, but I think more so is the limitation of having Mac Jones as his quarterback. We talked before about Trevor Lawrence and how he likely has a labral injury of the non-throwing shoulder. It sounds like they're going to hold off on surgery for right now, so we might see Trevor Lawrence back, in which case I do think Brian Thomas is viable. He's only going to get better as he gets further away from that injury, And like I said before, I don't think the limiting factor so much was his injury as it was the quarterback play. So if we can get Lawrence back, then Thomas becomes a viable wide receiver again. Kareem Hunt had a knee injury. They called it a knee sprain. That almost certainly means an MCL. They are concerned about his upcoming availability. I would be too if they think that it's severe enough that he's at risk for missing a game. You can miss games with MCL sprains, even grade 1, where we talk about it's mild inflammation. It's typically a 0 to 2 week absence. But in this situation, I'll definitely be trying to stock a backup like Samaje Perine or Carson Steele. They'll be dart throws pretty much. And we've already talked about Pacheco coming back. I do think he comes back week 13, and I think it creates a significant split between Pacheco and Hunt for the first couple of weeks. But I do think Pacheco takes back a really bell cow role for the fantasy football playoffs. At this point in the season, you need to begin culling your roster. I think Tank Bigsby is on that list, unfortunately. He's been dealing with the toe injury ongoing. He's got this acute ankle injury, and even worse, ETN returned to the RB1, significantly out-snapping Bigsby 3-1. So at this point going forward, I really don't think Bigsby is going to be viable. The ankle sprain, that's going to be something that he can get through. It's most certainly a low ankle sprain, meaning not that highlighted green area. It's more of the low ankle ligaments that you're able to play through. But the injury combined with his place in the pecking order makes Bigsby a drop candidate at this point, in my opinion. All right, so we got T. Higgins. He's missed the past couple of weeks, and I think he's got a good chance of missing this upcoming week with the bye following after that. He has the quad injury. He's also got the soft tissue hamstring injury that he had earlier in the season. Extremely high injury risk. You're probably not going to be able to trade him because no one really wants him. But there are people that are really obsessed with his production and really might want him for the playoffs. So if one of those approaches you with a trade offer, I would offload him. All right, so my recording's messing up. This is how my head's going to look for this video. But in terms of Austin Seibert, I think he's got either a hip flexor injury or a hip pointer. With kickers, that's super annoying because obviously their major skill is kicking the ball. And when you have a hip flexor injury or a hip pointer injury, that significantly interferes with that, with how specific they need to be with their accuracy. It can hold them out for a prolonged period of time. So until we see him practicing early in the week, I would be pretty wary about him playing that upcoming week. In terms of regular football players, it's about 0 to 1 weeks, maybe 2 weeks. But in terms of kickers, it's about a 3 to 4 week absence.